Stories, she fired her maid after a test, but the maid was an undercover CEO and... Have you ever looked at someone, a colleague, a friend, or even a public figure, and wondered, what are they truly like when no one is watching? When the masks come off? What if you had the power to peel back those layers, to see the raw, unvarnished truth? If you were considering investing billions in a company, would you trust a glossy prospectus, brimming with impressive figures and polished promises, or your own two eyes? I chose the latter. I decided to become a humble housekeeper to learn the truth, and the truth was more revealing than any balance sheet could ever be. Why would a woman at the pinnacle of global business, the CEO of Etheria Global Holdings, a vast conglomerate spanning luxury hotels, cutting-edge tech, and vital service industries, choose to scrub floors and make beds? To most, it would seem an absurd, perhaps even demeaning, proposition. But for me, Serafina Thorne, it was an imperative. You see, after decades spent navigating the treacherous, often opaque waters of corporate high society, I had grown profoundly disillusioned. My world was a gilded cage, populated by sycophants and opportunists, each vying for a piece of the Etheria pie. Every smile felt calculated, every compliment rehearsed, a strategic move in an endless game of power and influence. I longed for something real, for authenticity, for genuine human connection that wasn't filtered through the lens of my immense wealth and status. My fortune, once a symbol of my achievements, had become an invisible barrier, a distorting lens through which I could no longer discern true character, leaving me in a perpetual state of guarded isolation. The loneliness, a quiet hum beneath the roar of my success, had grown increasingly insistent. This yearning coincided with a pivotal moment for Etheria Global. We were on the brink of a massive, multi-billion-dollar acquisition, the Grandeur Estate, a prestigious, privately owned hotel renowned for its historical elegance and exclusive clientele. On paper, it was a perfect fit, a jewel that would undoubtedly enhance our luxury portfolio and solidify Etheria's dominance in the high-end hospitality sector. The financial projections were robust, the historical occupancy rates impressive, the brand equity seemingly impeccable. Yet, I had learned long ago that the most beautiful facades often concealed the deepest cracks. A business, particularly one in the hospitality sector, is not merely a collection of assets and revenue streams, it is a living, breathing entity, only as strong and resilient as the people who run it and sustain its daily operations. And I needed to know, truly know, the caliber of its management and staff, beyond the polished veneer presented in boardrooms and quarterly reports. I needed to see the soul of the establishment, not just its glittering exterior. This wasn't merely a financial decision, it was about integrating a new philosophy, a new spirit, into the Etheria family. If the Grangeur's core was rotten, no amount of money could truly fix it. My plan was meticulous, as all my endeavors are. I would shed my identity as Serafina Thorne, the formidable CEO, and step into the unassuming shoes of Sarah, new, quiet housekeeper. With discreet arrangements, I secured a position at the Grandeur Estate through a specialized agency that handled temporary hotel staff. My team, a select few I trusted implicitly, handled the necessary background fabrication, a credible, unremarkable past, just enough to pass basic checks without raising suspicion. I exchanged my bespoke suits for a simple, ill-fitting uniform of plain gray and white, my designer heels for practical, non-slip shoes. The transformation was physical, yes, but more profoundly, it was mental. I had to become invisible, a ghost in the machine. My goal wasn't to catch anyone in a grand act of villainy, but rather to observe the subtle nuances of daily operation, the interpersonal dynamics, and the underlying ethos of the place. I wanted to see how the staff treated each other, how they responded to pressure, how they communicated when they thought no one important was listening. Most importantly, I wanted to see how the owner, Clarissa Beaumont, treated them. Clarissa's reputation preceded her, a woman of sharp ambition and an even sharper tongue, known for her exacting standards and her uncompromising approach to business. This was my test, not just of the Grandeur Estate, but of humanity itself, stripped bare of pretense and privilege. I would be a silent observer, a shadow in the hallways, watching, learning, and ultimately, judging. The stakes were not just financial, they were moral, weighing the true human cost against the gleaming promise of profit. So, how did the owner of the Granger estate treat her new humble maid? My arrival as Sarah was, as expected, unremarkable. I was just another face in the bustling labyrinth of hotel staff, handed a uniform that smelled faintly of industrial detergent, a lanyard with a generic ID, and a set of jangling keys. I was assigned to a wing that serviced some of the most opulent suites, rooms that once, as Serafina, I would have effortlessly commanded. The Granger estate was indeed magnificent. Crystal chandeliers sparkled like captured galaxies, marble floors gleamed with an almost liquid polish, and the air was thick with the rich scent of lilies and expensive cleaning products. From the outside, it was the epitome of luxury and impeccable service, a beacon of refined elegance. Yet, within days, sometimes within mere hours, I began to see the faint, almost imperceptible fissures in this perfect facade, like hairline cracks appearing on an antique porcelain vase. The staff moved with a hurried, almost anxious efficiency. Their movements were precise, their smiles often tight, eyes darting, as if constantly anticipating a sudden storm or an unseen supervisor's gaze. Laughter was rare, confined to hushed whispers in the break room, quickly stifled the moment a manager's footsteps approached. It didn't take long to understand why. Clarissa Beaumont, the owner, was a woman who exuded an almost brittle perfection. Her suits were always impeccably tailored, her hair coiffed into a severe, unmoving helmet, her voice a precise, almost surgical instrument capable of cutting through any conversation with chilling efficiency. She moved through the hotel like a queen surveying her terrified subjects, her presence casting a palpable chill over the warmth of the opulent surroundings. She was a woman obsessed with image, with control, and with what she perceived as unwavering, unquestioning dedication. I quickly learned that her management style was characterized by what she called tests, aggressive, often demeaning exercises designed, she claimed, to weed out perceived weaknesses or disloyalty. In truth, they were tools of intimidation, a way to keep her staff on edge, perpetually aware of their expendability, like cogs in a machine constantly fearing replacement. I saw a young concierge reduced to tears over a misplaced reservation tag, a seasoned bellhop berated publicly for a minor scuff on a guest's luggage. The atmosphere was less about service excellence and more about avoiding Clarissa's wrath. My first significant observation, the one that truly set the tone for my undercover tenure and solidified my growing unease, involved Elias. Elias was the head of housekeeping, a man in his late 50s or early 60s, his hair silvering at the temples, his hands calloused and slightly gnarled from decades of dedicated, honest work. He moved with a quiet dignity, his eyes holding a weary kindness that belied the harsh environment. He was quiet, meticulous, and immensely respected by his team, who often sought his gentle counsel in their moments of stress. One Tuesday morning, a minor oversight occurred. A rare, artisanal soap, part of a bespoke luxury package, had been inadvertently placed in the wrong guest bathroom, a mistake that was quickly rectified before the guest even noticed. It was a trivial error, easily overlooked in the grand scheme of things, a human slip-up. Certainly not one that warranted the public spectacle that followed. Clarissa, however, somehow discovered it. Perhaps a spy, perhaps sheer bad luck. I was in a nearby linen closet, pretending to organize supplies, the scent of fresh sheets heavy in the air, when I heard her voice, sharp and piercing, echoing through the hallway. It was a sound that instantly stiffened the backs of every nearby staff member. She had Elias cornered near the staff entrance, her finger jabbing accusingly at his chest, her face a mask of furious indignation. "Elias! Do you know what this is? This is an affront to the grandeur. A disgrace. Our guests expect perfection, not these amateur slip-ups." Her voice escalated, shrill and cutting, drawing the attention of passing staff members, who quickly averted their eyes, pretending to be absorbed in their tasks, their movements suddenly clumsy with fear. Elias, a man who had dedicated decades of his life, his very essence, to this establishment, stood silently, his shoulders hunched, his face etched with profound humiliation. He tried to offer a quiet explanation, a humble apology, his voice barely a whisper, but Clarissa cut him off mercilessly. "Excuses, Elias? I have no time for excuses. This level of carelessness is unacceptable. You are dismissed. Effective immediately." The words hung in the air, cold and definitive, echoing the sound of a guillotine blade. Elias, his face pale, simply nodded, turned, and walked away, his gait slow, defeated, a man utterly broken. It was a public shaming, a brutal display of power designed to send a clear message: no one was safe, and loyalty meant nothing if it wasn't accompanied by unwavering, unblemished, unattainable perfection. I watched him go, a quiet fury brewing beneath my calm, Sarah, exterior. This was Clarissa's true face, and it was uglier than I had imagined. It was a face of unbridled cruelty, devoid of any shred of humanity or respect for years of service. Clarissa's tests were not subtle. A few days after Elias's departure, I found myself the subject of one. I was assigned to a suite that had just been vacated, its previous occupants apparently rather messy, leaving a chaotic trail of used towels and scattered personal items. As I systematically cleaned, my eyes, trained for detail, spotted it, a small, intricately carved silver locket, resting innocently on the bedside table, half hidden beneath a discarded magazine. It looked old, perhaps antique, and certainly valuable, shimmering faintly in the morning light filtering through the window. I immediately recognized it as a planted item, a classic, lost and found, test designed to assess my honesty and, as Clarissa would put it, my assertive initiative. I picked it up carefully, noting its delicate craftsmanship, the faint impression of a forgotten initial on its surface. My instructions were clear: any valuable item found was to be immediately reported to the floor manager, then secured in the lost and found vault. I followed the protocol precisely, walking directly to the floor manager's desk, explaining where I found it, and handing it over with a neutral, almost impassive expression. I watched the manager, a harried woman named Mrs. Henderson, meticulously log the item, noting the time and my name, her pen scratching nervously. Later that day, Clarissa herself approached me in the hallway, her presence announced by the sharp click of her heels on the marble floor. A tight, almost artificial smile was plastered on her lips. "Sarah, you found a locket, yes?" she asked, her eyes scrutinizing mine, trying to pierce through my carefully constructed facade. "Yes, Ms. Beaumont." I reported it immediately to Mr. Davies, the floor manager. She nodded slowly, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, which remained cold and appraising. "Good. Promptness is key, Sarah. Absolute promptness." Her tone implied a subtle dissatisfaction, as if I hadn't reported it quite fast enough, or with enough fanfare, perhaps not running breathlessly to her with the treasure. She expected a performance, not merely competence. I merely nodded, continuing with my tasks, my internal notes on her testing methods growing longer, confirming my suspicions that she sought not just integrity, but a subservient display of frantic diligence. The locket test, however, was merely a backdrop to another, far more revealing interaction I observed that same day. This one involved Ilara. Ilara was a young pastry chef, barely out of culinary school, perhaps 22 or 23, but already showing immense talent. Her creations were delicate, innovative, and bursting with flavor, a stark contrast to the often sterile atmosphere of the grandeur. She was earnest, hard-working, and possessed a quiet warmth, a genuine spark that was a rarity in that demanding, fear-ridden environment. I had seen her often in the staff canteen, her face usually bright, even when exhausted, talking animatedly about new recipes or the perfect texture of a macaron. But that afternoon, her usual vibrancy was gone, replaced by a profound anxiety that seemed to cling to her like a shroud. I was finishing up in the staff break room, wiping down tables, the lingering smell of stale coffee and microwave meals hanging in the air, when Ilara cautiously approached Clarissa, who was engrossed in a phone call, pacing back and forth near the window, her voice a low, commanding murmur. Elara waited patiently, wringing her hands, until Clarissa abruptly hung up, then took a deep, trembling breath. "Ms. Beaumont," she began, her voice quivering slightly, her eyes wide with a genuine plea, "I need to request a few days off, immediately. My mother, she's had a sudden medical emergency, and I need to be there for her." Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, a silent prayer. Clarissa turned, her expression cold and unyielding, a mask of stone. She didn't offer a word of comfort or even a flicker of sympathy. Instead, she crossed her arms, a dismissive look on her face, her gaze raking over Elara with disdain. "A medical emergency, Elara? And what, pray tell, does that have to do with the delicate art of soufflés for tomorrow's brunch service? Do you think the guests care about your personal woes? My schedule, Elara, is meticulously planned. Your absence would create an unacceptable disruption. This is not a charity, it's a business. Your family troubles are your own to manage. You are expected to be here, as per your contract." Her words were delivered with chilling precision, each one a tiny icicle. Elara's face fell, her hope visibly draining away, replaced by a crushing despair. But Ms. Beaumont, my mother is alone. There's no one else. It's serious." Clarissa scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain, her lip curling slightly. "Serious? Everything is serious to someone, Elara. What I consider serious is the bottom line. If you cannot maintain your professional obligations due to family matters, then perhaps this is not the right establishment for you. Now, return to the kitchen. The brunch menu won't bake itself." Her tone was a dismissal, a final, heartless decree. Elara stood frozen for a moment, her young face contorted with pain, then, without another word, she turned and walked away, her shoulders slumped, her once bright spirit utterly crushed beneath the weight of Clarissa's indifference. I watched her go, a profound sadness settling over me. Clarissa's callousness was not just professional, it was deeply, fundamentally inhumane. She saw her staff not as individuals with lives and struggles, but as cogs in a machine, easily replaced if they dared to malfunction. This was the true grandeur, magnificent on the outside, utterly heartless within. The perfect facade was indeed cracking, revealing a rotten core. But Clarissa's ultimate mistake, the one that sealed her fate in my eyes, came just moments after this exchange. I had finished my shift and was heading to the staff exit, the gray uniform feeling heavier than ever, when I saw Elias, the recently dismissed head of housekeeping, sitting on a bench outside, his head in his hands. He looked utterly despondent, his once meticulous uniform now wrinkled, his shoulders slumped in defeat, a broken man. He had nowhere to go, no immediate plans, just the raw sting of unjust dismissal and the sudden void where his life's work had been. As I paused, observing him from a discreet distance, a hidden figure in the shadows of the staff alley, Elara emerged from the kitchen entrance, carrying a small, brown paper bag. She approached Elias cautiously, her own face still etched with the pain of her mother's illness and Clarissa's cold dismissal. She sat down beside him, not saying a word at first, simply offering a silent presence. Then, she opened the bag. Inside was a simple sandwich, a piece of fruit, and a small juice box, clearly her own meager lunch, likely all she had for the day, a small comfort she could ill afford to share. "Mr. Elias," she said softly, her voice still a little shaky from her own ordeal, I know it's not much. But I thought, you might be hungry." She pushed the bag gently towards him, her fingers brushing his arm with a tentative kindness. Elias looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and swollen, and stared at the humble offering. He looked at Elara, this young woman burdened by her own crisis, her mother gravely ill, her job potentially at risk, yet still finding the capacity for such quiet, profound kindness, a selfless act of compassion. A tear tracked down his weathered cheek, a silent testament to the unexpected grace. "Elara," he croaked, his voice thick with emotion, raw with gratitude. "You are too kind. You have your own troubles, child." "We all do, sometimes," she replied, her voice filled with a quiet wisdom beyond her years, a simple truth in a world of complex calculations. "But it doesn't mean we stop being human." She gave him a gentle, empathetic smile, a flicker of warmth in the cold, gray afternoon. "Please. Take it." Elias nodded, reaching for the bag, his hand trembling slightly. He took a bite of the sandwich, and for the first time since his dismissal, a flicker of something other than despair crossed his face, a glimmer of hope, of renewed dignity. He wasn't just receiving food, he was receiving an act of profound, selfless humanity in a place that had just stripped him of his dignity and worth. This quiet exchange, this simple act of shared sustenance between two people crushed by Clarissa's ruthlessness, spoke volumes. It was the purest form of character, unbidden and uncalculated, born of an innate goodness. It was everything Clarissa lacked, and everything I had truly come to find. I continued to observe for a short while longer, ensuring my final assessment was complete. My observations, my notes, my carefully compiled mental dossiers, were all in order. I had seen enough. The Granger estate, under Clarissa Beaumont's stewardship, was a gleaming shell, hollowed out by fear and devoid of compassion. Its opulence was a veneer, its heart a vacuum. The next morning, Clarissa summoned me. I stood before her, my Sarah persona perfectly maintained, quiet, deferential, seemingly intimidated, my hands clasped loosely in front of me. She clasped her own hands on her polished desk, her expression a careful blend of professional formality and thinly veiled condescension, her eyes holding that familiar, piercing appraisal. "Sarah," she began, her voice precise, almost clinical, "I've been reviewing your performance. You reported the locket, yes, and that was correct procedure. But your overall approach, it lacks the assertive initiative and unwavering dedication needed for the Granger estate. You seem, dare I say, overly empathetic. This is a demanding environment, Sarah. There's no room for sentimentality. We require individuals who are sharp, proactive, and singularly focused on the guest experience, not distractions. Therefore, I'm afraid your services are no longer required. You are dismissed." She handed me a final paycheck, a small, almost dismissive gesture, barely meeting my eyes. I took it, my gaze steady, betraying nothing of the maelstrom of thoughts within me. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth, yet a quiet triumph resonated in my heart. "I understand, Ms. Beaumont," I said, my voice quiet, as befitted a meek housekeeper who knew her place. I turned and walked out, leaving the gleaming, heartless Granger estate behind me, my mission complete. Being fired for failing Clarissa's superficial test, for being too empathetic, after witnessing such genuine humanity from Alara and Elias, solidified every conclusion I had drawn. The acquisition, I now knew, would not proceed, at least not in the way Clarissa envisioned. The Granger estate would not become part of Etheria Global as long as she presided over its rotten core. But every deception has its grand finale, doesn't it? The stage was set. Clarissa Beaumont had scheduled a high-stakes meeting with Etheria Global Holdings. She believed it was the final, crucial step in securing the multi-billion-dollar acquisition of the Granger estate, the culmination of her life's ambition. Her office, usually a bastion of cool professionalism, buzzed with an almost frantic energy. Clarissa, resplendent in a sharp power suit, paced nervously, rehearsing her final pitch, adjusting her perfectly coiffed hair. She expected my chief financial officer, perhaps my head of acquisitions, certainly not me, the CEO, to grace her humble establishment. That was precisely the point. The black, armored limousine, a sleek, silent behemoth, glided to a halt outside the Granger estate's grand entrance, a stark contrast to the discreet taxi I had taken just weeks before. The chauffeur, impeccably uniformed, opened the door with a practiced flourish, and I stepped out. I was no longer Sarah, the housekeeper. I was Seraphina Thorne, CEO of Etheria Global Holdings. My attire was a custom-tailored suit, a deep sapphire blue, radiating quiet authority, its fabric flowing with every deliberate movement. My hair, previously pulled back in a practical, severe bun, was now styled elegantly, cascading around my shoulders, and a subtle but undeniable air of command emanated from me, a presence that filled the space around me. Behind me, my legal counsel, Mr. Sterling, a man whose reputation for dismantling corporations with surgical precision was legendary, emerged from a second vehicle, followed by two stern-faced security personnel, their expressions unyielding. As we swept through the opulent lobby, the atmosphere shifted perceptibly. The hushed whispers of staff members ceased, replaced by a sudden, stunned silence. The same staff members who had once ignored Sarah, barely registering her presence, now stared, their faces a mixture of curiosity, apprehension, and dawning recognition. The general manager, a man named Mr. Harrington, typically a pillar of composure, appeared pale and flustered, rushing forward, clearly expecting a different arrival, perhaps a team of junior executives. "Miss Thorne. Welcome. We weren't expecting you personally." His voice was a nervous stammer. I offered a cool, polite smile, the kind that never quite reached my eyes, a professional mask perfectly deployed. "Yes, well, some matters require personal attention, wouldn't you agree?" My voice, once soft and demure as Sarah, now resonated with an undeniable power, each word carrying the weight of billions, a quiet declaration of absolute authority. We were ushered into Clarissa's office. She stood, beaming, her hand outstretched, ready to launch into her carefully rehearsed presentation, a triumphant smile on her lips. Her eyes widened slightly as she saw me, then narrowed in confusion, a flicker of something akin to fear beginning to show. Her smile faltered, her hand dropping slowly. "Miss Thorne. A pleasure, of course. But I thought we were meeting with your acquisition team." Her voice held a note of forced cheerfulness, barely concealing her growing unease. I walked slowly towards her massive mahogany desk, my eyes sweeping over her, taking in her perfectly coiffed hair, her expensive suit, the confident glint in her eyes that was about to be extinguished. Mr. Sterling settled into a chair with quiet efficiency, opening a slim briefcase, his expression utterly unreadable, a silent harbinger of doom. "Clarissa," I began, my voice calm, almost conversational, yet carrying an undertone of steel that made her visibly flinch, a tremor running through her carefully constructed poise. "Before we discuss the acquisition, I believe we have a more pressing matter to address." Her brows furrowed in genuine confusion, then a flicker of defensiveness. "A pressing matter? I'm not sure I understand." "Oh, I think you do," I countered, allowing a hint of my true disappointment and quiet fury to color my tone, a subtle shift that made her visibly tense. "You see, for the past few weeks, I haven't been Serafina Thorne, the CEO considering a multi-billion-dollar investment. I've been Sarah, one of your housekeepers. The quiet, overly empathetic one you dismissed just yesterday." The color drained from Clarissa's face, leaving it a ghastly white, as if all the blood had fled. Her jaw went slack, hanging open in disbelief. Her perfectly composed facade crumbled, revealing a raw, primal horror, a desperate, cornered animal. You were a maid?" The words were a strangled whisper, laced with disbelief and dawning terror, as if the very concept defied reality. That's impossible. You're Serafina Thorne. This is a trick. A cruel joke." "No trick, Clarissa," I stated, my voice gaining an edge of authority that left no room for doubt, each word a hammer blow. "Just an assessment. An unfiltered, unvarnished assessment of the Grandeur estate, and more importantly, of you." I leaned forward slightly, my gaze piercing, unwavering. "I witnessed Elias, your diligent head of housekeeping, publicly humiliated and summarily dismissed over a trivial oversight. A man who gave you decades of his life, discarded like an old rag, his dignity stripped away for a misplaced bar of soap." Clarissa tried to interject, her voice regaining a fraction of its former sharpness, he was inefficient. He made mistakes. Our standards are exacting. He was human, Clarissa, I cut her off, my voice sharp now, resonating with a controlled indignation. And you treated him with contempt, with a cruelty that defies reason. I also observed the so-called test you put me through with the locket. A rather predictable exercise, I must say, for someone who prides herself on originality. But what truly sealed your fate was not my finding the locket, nor even my failure in your eyes. It was your callous disregard for Elara, your young, talented pastry chef, when she pleaded for time to be with her dying mother. You chose soufflés over a human life, a contract over compassion. Clarissa's eyes darted frantically around the room, as if seeking an escape, her composure utterly shattered, her meticulously crafted world collapsing around her. Her family matters are not my concern. Business is business. We cannot allow personal issues to compromise service, she stammered, her voice rising in desperation. Business built on cruelty is no business at all, I retorted, rising slowly to my feet, my presence towering over her now. And then, I watched as you fired Sarah for lacking assertive initiative and being overly empathetic. The irony is truly astounding, considering what I witnessed just moments after you delivered your cold decree. I paused, allowing the full weight of my words to sink in, letting the silence amplify the truth. But what you did not see, Clarissa, was Elara, a young woman burdened by her own immense grief and professional stress, sitting on a bench with a devastated Elias, a man you had just broken, sharing her meager lunch with him, simply because he was hurting. That, Clarissa, was true character. That was genuine humanity. Everything you lack, everything your grandeur utterly fails to embody. This is outrageous. Clarissa shrieked, finding her voice, though it was now shrill, desperate, and cracking with fear. You can't do this. The acquisition is set. We have a preliminary agreement. This is corporate espionage. I'll sue. Mr. Sterling stepped forward, his voice calm, cutting through Clarissa's rising hysteria like a sharp blade. Ms. Beaumont, preliminary agreements are contingent on due diligence. And our due diligence, conducted by Ms. Thorne personally, has revealed a fundamental incompatibility between your operational ethos and Etheria Global's core values. The acquisition, as previously discussed, is terminated. Effective immediately. He handed her a formal document, a clear, concise declaration of the deal's collapse, printed on Etheria Global letterhead. Clarissa snatched the paper, her eyes scanning it wildly, her hands trembling so violently she nearly dropped it. Her empire, built on a foundation of fear and superficiality, was crumbling before her very eyes, exposed as a hollow shell. Her desperate pleas, her frantic attempts to backtrack, to apologize, to justify her actions, were met with my unwavering, disappointed gaze. The Grandeur estate, her prized possession, was now financially exposed, its future uncertain, its reputation irrevocably tainted by my revelations, a ghost of its former self. Her final cries were choked, pathetic sounds of a woman losing everything she had built on the wrong foundations. The fallout was immediate and devastating for Clarissa. Word, as it always does, spread like wildfire through the exclusive, gossipy circles of the elite hotel circuit. The story of Serafina Thorne, the undercover CEO, and Clarissa Beaumont's brutal, heartless management style, became the whispered scandal, and cautionary tale. Etheria Global's public statement, though carefully worded and professional, subtly highlighted our commitment to ethical leadership and employee welfare, a pointed jab that left no room for misinterpretation about the true reasons for the aborted acquisition. Without the infusion of billions from Etheria, the Grandeur estate, already struggling with underlying financial instabilities masked by its opulent facade, began to hemorrhage funds at an alarming rate. Key staff members, emboldened by the truth and disgusted by Clarissa's behavior, started resigning in droves, unable to stomach the oppressive atmosphere any longer. The prestigious reputation she had so meticulously cultivated began to unravel, replaced by hushed whispers of her cruelty and the toxic environment she fostered. Within months, the Grandeur estate was forced into receivership, its grandeur a faded memory, its name synonymous with a lack of integrity. It was eventually sold off in pieces, its assets dispersed, its owner, Clarissa Beaumont, left with nothing but a shattered reputation and crippling debt. The woman who valued image and control above all else, found herself stripped bare, exposed for the cruel and heartless individual she truly was. But for Elias and Elara, their lives, so unjustly disrupted, were about to undergo a miraculous transformation, a turning of the tide. My first order of business, once my true identity was revealed and the dust settled, was to locate them. It wasn't difficult, true character leaves an indelible imprint. I found Elias in a small, quiet cafe, sipping coffee, still visibly shaken but bearing his misfortune with a quiet dignity that was profoundly moving. When I approached him, no longer Sarah, but Seraphina Thorne, and revealed my true purpose, his eyes widened with disbelief, a flicker of hope and confusion. He thought it was a cruel joke, a figment of his despair. "Mr. Elias," I said, my voice gentle, infused with genuine respect, "I witnessed your dedication, your integrity, and most importantly, the profound humanity you still possessed even after being so unjustly treated. Clarissa Beaumont judged you on trivialities, I judge you on character, on the quiet strength of your spirit. I want to offer you a new position within Etheria Global. Not just a job, but a pivotal, defining role. I'm establishing a new internal division focused entirely on employee welfare and dignified retirement planning for our long-serving staff across all our properties. Your experience, your quiet wisdom, and your empathy are precisely what we need to lead it. It will be a role of respect, security, and immense purpose, where your kindness will be a guiding principle, not a weakness." Elias, a man who had faced the prospect of a bleak, uncertain future, his life's work seemingly undone, could only stare, tears welling in his eyes, cascading freely down his weathered cheeks. "Miss Thorne. I don't know what to say. This is a dream. An impossible dream." He grasped my hand, a silent promise of loyalty and dedication in his touch, a bond forged in shared experience. He accepted, and today, he leads that division with a quiet authority and a deep understanding of human dignity, ensuring no one in Etheria Global ever experiences the indignity he suffered. Finding Elara was equally important. She was still struggling with her mother's illness, trying to balance her meager earnings from temporary catering gigs with mounting medical bills, the weight of responsibility heavy on her young shoulders. When I met her, she still carried the burden of worry, but also that quiet resilience, that indomitable spirit I had observed. "Elara," I began, cutting straight to the chase, my words precise but warm, "your act of kindness towards Elias, despite your own overwhelming troubles, was the most profound demonstration of character I witnessed at the Grandeur estate. It showed me more about true leadership and compassion than any corporate report or financial projection ever could. Therefore, I want to offer you a full scholarship to the most prestigious culinary academy in Paris, with all expenses covered, tuition, accommodation, materials, including a generous stipend for your family's medical needs. And upon your graduation, a guaranteed position as head pastry chef at the Seraphina, our flagship luxury hotel, where your immense talent and your compassionate heart will be truly valued and nurtured." Elara's jaw dropped. Her eyes, which had held so much worry, now shone with a mixture of shock and overwhelming joy, reflecting the hope that had suddenly flooded her world. A scholarship? Paris? Miss Thorne, I can't believe it. This is impossible. I don't know what to say." She wept, not tears of sorrow, but of pure, unadulterated relief and profound gratitude. She embraced me, a raw, emotional hug that was worth more than any acquisition, a testament to the power of genuine human connection. Today, Chef Elara is a rising star in the culinary world, her desserts legendary, a true artist in her field, her mother healthy, and her family secure, their future bright. She sends me a new creation for my birthday every year, a sweet reminder of true worth, baked with love and gratitude. So what happened to them all after that tumultuous day? Clarissa Beaumont's fall from grace was absolute and irreversible. The Grandeur estate, once her monument to control and image, ceased to exist as she knew it, its name now a bitter memory. The whispers of her cruelty followed her, and she vanished from the high society circles she once so desperately courted, her name now mentioned only as a cautionary tale. As for me, the peace of mind I gained from rewarding the deserving, from confirming my deepest suspicions about human nature, was immeasurable. I did acquire a new property, but it was a smaller, struggling boutique hotel known for its incredibly loyal staff and heartwarming community spirit, which I transformed into a thriving, ethical venture, a true testament to Etheria's new philosophy, a place where kindness and excellence coexisted. My time as Sarah was the most enlightening due diligence I had ever conducted, far more valuable than any spreadsheet. I learned my lesson about human nature, a lesson that truly cemented my beliefs. True character is never revealed by how someone treats their superiors, or those who can benefit them, but by how they treat those who can do nothing for them, or worse, those they perceive as beneath them. Compassion, empathy, and quiet kindness, these are the real currencies of wealth, far more valuable than any fortune, and they are the true foundations upon which lasting success and genuine fulfillment are built. Our channel is full of stories like this, where hidden truths come to light and true character shines through. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. Have you ever been surprised by someone's true colors, for better or worse? Tell me your story in the comments below.